Hi, I'm Kent Vaughn with Blaze Performance Solutions.
And I'm David Williams. And at Blaze, we believe that complexity is at the center of the world's most significant challenges.
Yes, complexity causes Americans to work among the longest hours of any advanced economy. We're time-starved, busy, and so often disengaged at work. At Blaze, we specialize in simplification. Simplification, frankly, is the competitive advantage that allows you to be more innovative, more adaptable, and to thrive. We want to welcome you to this segment of the Blaze Leadership Academy. Today, we're going to be talking about delegation and accountability. David, why don't you walk us through the 4 steps of RPDD?
You know, Ken, as we get ready to go through this, I think of what we just said there about how we specialize in simplification. And you'll see the power of this mindset come out in this video presentation of, how do you drive delegation? How do you drive accountability? It's a very simple process to follow. Not easy to do, but it's a very simple process to follow. And we refer to it as request, promise, deliver, and discuss. So when we talk about request, all we're saying is establish clarity and making commitments and setting deadlines. Put a big star beside this because if you don't do the request piece right, uh, everything else is just going to collapse around the whole conversation that you're trying to have. So establish clarity, making commitments, and setting deadlines. This is the linchpin. It's the foundation of driving accountability and having effective delegation. The second is promise. Make commitments that that can and still be honored by all parties involved. Make sure that those commitments that are being made can be achieved, can be done, right? Because if you overpromise and underdeliver, we know the results of that. So make commitments that can and will be honored by all parties involved. The first D is deliver. Follow through on the commitments. Follow through on the commitments. You would think this would be easy enough to remember, but we as leaders, we sometimes we get so busy in doing other things that we forget about the conversations that we've had with our direct reports, or we forget conversations we had with somebody that we report to. And so making sure that people are following through on the commitments. Just don't wait until the deadline, but follow through on the commitments. And the last one is discuss. Have the honest conversations about the results. Now, we typically have conversations around the results if they're bad, and more times than not, they are honest conversations. But what we also need to understand is that if the results are good, there needs to be honest conversation around those results as well. So make sure, regardless of the results, you have this honest conversation going on. So, Kent, you want to any comments before we move on to the next slide?
Well, the thing that I was thinking about is this. There are a lot of assignments that you're giving to people that you don't have to go through a lot of detail. It's a recurring kind of thing. They understand what's required. They just need to know that this is that thing and it's due by Friday at 2:00, right? But anytime you've got something that's kind of out of the ordinary, or you have a new employee, or it's a different situation, or it's a very high visibility situation, then that's when we recommend you slow down and make sure that everyone is really clear about what the request is, what we're promising and when it's going to be promised, what the delivery looks like, and then have a discussion about what went well or didn't go well. As David said, we often have conversations when things don't go well. What we don't do is have conversations when things do go well and just say, thanks for what you did, well done. It's amazing how a little positive reinforcement can go a long way at helping people continue to do the things well that they've been doing well. The other piece of this is that this doesn't have to take a long time.
Mm-hmm.
We're not saying sit down for 30 minutes. It can be very, very quick, but just make sure everyone's really clear on the pieces. That's all I'd add, David.
Yeah, and so I mean, this is a process that you and I have used over the years. I was able to use it in heavy duty manufacturing situations, and this RPDD process really helped prevented us from making mistakes and all the different initiatives that I've been involved in. I know you've experienced the same thing as well. So when we talk about request, all we're really talking about is hold others accountable. To hold others accountable, we must delegate. And to delegate effectively, we must work by agreement. So to delegate effectively, we must work by agreement. So Kent, I'm going to have you walk them through what do we mean when we say must work by agreement?
Great point. We've all worked for leaders, and maybe even are the leaders sometimes, they're a little dictatorial. Do this, by this, by this, by this. You can absolutely do that. But here's what we know. When you are a dictator, you completely take out people's desire to bring anything extra to the table. They don't bring out their, extra thought, extra time, extra ideas. They'll just do exactly what's required, nothing more, nothing less. And so we end up missing out on a lot of opportunities when we do that. So work by agreement is we're really just trying to establish clarity in making commitments and setting deadlines. So everyone knows exactly what it looks like, what we're looking for, and the deadlines, right? The second piece of this is request commitments that can be honored. And that's really important because Dave and I have seen this so many times. We'll go to someone on our team and ask them to do something, and they'll say, I'm happy to do that, but you remember yesterday you gave me these 3 things to do by Friday. If I do those things, I'm probably not gonna be able to finish this thing. And I go, every time I go, oh, totally forgot that. Yeah, keep doing what you're doing. We'll find someone else to work on that, right? Or once in a blue moon, it's the world has changed. And we've got to do this first. Let's push those 3 things off, or I'll take one of them back, give one to David, I'll do one or whatever, right? But it's having that conversation to make sure that people actually really can do it. Sometimes people say, hey, you remember, I'm going to be off work the next couple of days going to my child's high school graduation. We literally had that happen just last week with a client, actually. So what we're trying to do is say, slow down, make sure everyone stands very clearly what it is, when it's due, and let's make sure these are commitments that people in fact can honor and not just think, well, do it because I said so.
Mm-hmm.
Again, when we do that, we don't get the discretionary thought, the discretionary time, the discretionary energy. People can choose whether to bring that or not, right? You can buy people's back at work, their back. You can buy their hands. You can buy part of their brain. But what you can't buy is that discretionary thought and energy that they come in on Monday morning and say, I was thinking about this. I think we could really improve our systems. You're going, oh, wow, I love that. Love that you came up with that. So after request, we're really clear, then it's promise. Can you do this? And again, we have there this idea of mutual agreement. There are 3 ideas and then 4 possibilities that can happen here. 1, mutual agreement upon the expectations that are set. Make sure everyone understands what it is. Dialogue, again, not dictating orders. Both employees and leaders accept the terms. By the way, let me say something about this. You can use this with your boss. When your boss comes to you and wants something, make sure you're clear about what the expectations are and that you're having a dialogue and that everyone agrees to the terms. And if they're in a hurry, if I come to you and say, hey, I need this by Friday at 2:00, and you do it, very great idea for you to say, hey, wait a minute, can I just ask a couple of questions here to make sure I'm really clear on what you want? Because we were just joking a few minutes ago, David and I, when we were actually teaching this class to a client about, have you ever asked for a camel and you got a Hummer? You ever asked for this and you got that? And you know what? When that's the case, it was always a communication problem, an understanding problem. It's because I was in too big a hurry usually. And I wasn't really clear about what I wanted or when it was due or whatever else. Now, when you do this means that we can discuss and come to some kind of agreement. And when we think about agreement, we're talking about at least 4 different ideas. Number 1, yes, I will do X, this report by Y, Friday at 2:00. Or they might say, no, but yes, if. I can't do it by Friday at 2:00 because of this, this, and this. Can we do it by Monday at 2, right? So we're going to explore options. And that may be when you as a leader have to kind of clear the path and say, no, this is such a high priority. Let's take that thing off of your plate and do this other thing. But hey, better to have that discussion now than Friday at 2:00. Alternative. What's an alternative? How about if I do X, the report, by Z, by, as I said, Monday at 2 or something? And they say, no, I got to have it by Friday at 2:00. Okay, so let's come up with another alternative. And finally, can I get back to you? I'm not sure, but could I get back to you by Z, by tomorrow, by this afternoon at 3, by whatever, right? the idea here is we're trying to create a dialogue and create absolute agreement. When we've seen failure again and again and again in organizations, and we've seen this from the C-suite of FedEx, Walmart, Home Depot, Toyota, Nissan, clients of ours over the years, all the way down the front line, it's when people get in a hurry, they just want to get it off their plate and hope that that person will figure it out, right? Well, what happens is what my father used to say to me all the time growing up. He used to say, Kent, if you don't have time to do it well the first time, how will you ever find time to do it right the second time? That's so true here, right? Now, what we're not saying here is micromanagement. Let me go back here. I moved my slide a little too soon. Is trying to micromanage them or them micromanage us. We're trying to really create effective communication. And as you've heard us say in some of our communication programs, the biggest problem with communication is the assumption it occurred, the assumption that they know what I'm looking for, they understand all the details, and so on and so forth. So as you think about promise and mutual agreement, David, what comes to your mind about failure past and just your own experience with this?
So I was just thinking you and I shared stories like this before in the past, and I just thought of another situation when I was general manager for a polyethylene plant down in Tarboro, North Carolina. Uh, it was when I first took over the leadership role there, it was very common for people in sales and in the corporate environment that would come to us on Friday at 2 o'clock and saying, you have to work the weekend. And of course, all the employees would rightfully get upset because they had planned for the weekend, and now come to find out because of customer expectations, we need to work this weekend and get it done. And I mean, I began to use this model with the sales team and some of the people in planning, some of the planning team, and really use this as a way to shape a way of thinking that hadn't been prevalent within the organization before. And so what ultimately ended up happening is that sales was able to have the right conversations with the client. Then they were able to come to us at the plant, have the right conversations with us. And more times than not, overtime and working on the weekends was avoided, right? Because it was either yes, no, the alternative, or get back to you, these four things. And if we hadn't been doing this, we hadn't been having that type of conversation, people would just continue to get frustrated, would have cost overruns. And I mean, when the plant was working in overtime, it was highly inefficient for them to be working in overtime. And so the yes, no, the alternative, to get back to were critical question statements that we went through to make sure that we could eliminate unnecessary overtime. And what was interesting is I mean, this is kind of a shocker to everybody. When we went back to the customer and said, hey, this is the impact it's going to have on us, we'll be glad to do it for you, but by any means. But what is there something else that we can do to make this work for you? And the customer would always say, wow, we didn't realize we were putting that much pressure on your system. And so we were able to even work with the customer for that, help the customer get better at what they're doing. So that story came to my mind as you were going through those 4 points right there. Yes, no, alternative, get back to you.
What a great example. This reminds me of two things. One, there is an old adage that to underpromise and overdeliver. So often we get in the mindset of serving the customer, serving the company, serving whomever it is, that we tend to overpromise and say, yeah, I can do that by Friday at 2 o'clock. And then about 5 minutes later, you realize there's no way I can get that done by then without staying, 20 hours for the next 2 days or whatever. So this idea of getting back to you is really a good one. Can I just check on a couple things and get back to you in the next 30 minutes or whatever?
Yeah, and that's
Often you
big.
can do
It's
that.
big.
It's
Yeah,
really
that's
big.
big.
Let me just check on a couple of things. Can I just get back to it? And then what David said, being truthful with the client and saying, hey, we will do this, but it's going to require us to do this and this. Do you really need it then? And a lot of times they say, I really don't. And so here's what's interesting I have found, because I am definitely an overpromise, underdeliver guy. My definition, I want overpromise. Doesn't mean I always underdeliver, right? But I tend to want to overpromise. What I have found in the last few years is I will say to clients, when do you need that by? When would you like that proposal? When do you want that, whatever? They almost always are further out in the future than what I was thinking. And I'm thinking, wow, that's great. Yeah, next Tuesday at 2 o'clock would be awesome. And then I'll put a note down, put it in my Outlook or whatever else, a reminder, right? So this idea of slowing down and under promise and then over deliver, right? So they want it Tuesday at 2 o'clock, say, I could get that done by Monday at 5. Well, now you're a hero instead of killing yourself, and it doesn't come out as well as you would have hoped. Now, let me tell you another example of a client of ours. We had a client many years ago, a large organization, and there was this one lady who was an administrative assistant for 3 executive vice presidents. I have no idea why she had 3 that she worked for, but she was a superstar, and we were doing work with the executive team around strategy, execution, a lot of work David and I have been doing there for a long time. And she grabbed a hold of this, and she said, one day when we were there, she said, it's interesting. One of the EVPs I work for, who shall remain nameless, is very proactive. 2 are very reactive. They tend to wait to the last minute on things. And so this happens to me all the time on a Friday. Friday at 4 or 5 o'clock, one of them will come to me and say, one of those 2 that aren't very good planners, they're pretty reactive, and say, hey, you got to have this done today. I know it's going to make you stay 2 or 3 hours late. I'm sorry, so sorry, but I got to have this now. And she said that happened all the time. So here's what she started doing. After she started listening to this, she started going to all 3 of them on Friday morning, first thing in the morning. And she would say, hey, I know it's Friday. I know that's a surprise. Who knew it got here so fast? And I just want to check in and see, what are the hot things you have right now? What are things you can see that are going to need some extra attention today to wrap up before we call it a day? And she said, the one guy never had anything. Proactive guy rarely had anything. The other 2 guys almost always said, oh, I'm so glad you asked, because and they're looking at things like, oh, I got to have this done. I got to have this done. And they're like, she's like, why didn't you tell me before? She didn't say that. She said, that made my life so much easier by going proactively to a couple of these leaders who perennially forgot about things, were late, were behind. She said it really made my life a lot easier, and rarely did I have to stay after 5 on Friday night. Now, if you know in advance, you have to do that. But just like that team at Davis Manufacturing Plant in Tarboro, North Carolina, people get really upset when you tell them Friday at 2 o'clock you have to come in on Saturday, and they'd been planning on going to the lake, going to their kid's ball game, whatever, right? That's really frustrating. So this is request and promise. If these 2 parts, as David said, aren't done well at the beginning, forget about the rest of it. Forget about the rest of it. If those aren't done well, the rest aren't going to happen well. But let's look at the 2 Ds together. Discuss and deliver. Deliver first and discuss. So it's really kind of an accountability meeting. And what we mean by this is, so often we tell people when things don't go well, but we don't tell them nearly enough when things are going well. So make sure to take a little time when things go well to thank people, to recognize what they've done. It's amazing how people rise to the level of expectation. Our experience has been, the majority of the time when people make a mistake, they know they made a mistake, and they don't need us to jump on them with all 4 feet, as it were, right? But don't get nearly enough appreciation when things go well. So this process is good anytime, but particularly when you have a project that you're working on that you've asked someone to do, that's going to be over multiple weeks, and you want to just know what's going on and have some follow-up. So on the front end, talk about having this conversation. David, you want to walk us through the steps of this accountability meeting?
Yeah. So what you want to do is, what did you commit to completing since we last met, right? So you've had the conversation. Now you say, hey, what did we commit to? Let's check and see what's going on with those. Was it completed? Yes or no? This isn't a time to give excuses. All we need to, hey, was it completed? Yes or no? If it wasn't, let's talk about it. If it was, let's move on. And so what will you commit to completing by the next time we meet again? So asking that question, what are you going to commit to completing? And notice what we are saying here is you ask the question, have the person commit, right? You don't tell the person it has to be done, boom, boom, boom. You're working with that individual, and together you come up with a commitment, and that person says, hey, this is what I can commit to consistently, right? That I know I won't let you down. And then where can I help remove barriers to your success? So if you don't like, what you're actually hearing from the individual, right? So they report to you, you're the leader, you don't like what you're hearing, then ask the question, hey, what can I do to remove the barriers that's going to allow you to get this done sooner than what we had anticipated, right? And when you ask that question, how can I help you? What barriers do I need to remove? that person sitting across the table knows, okay, now you bought in to their success. You want to make sure that they're successful, and that it comes straight from the second principle of engagement is, or the second principle of employee engagement. Do I feel connected? Is there somebody that I'm working with that is committed to my success just as I am my very own? And when you ask that question, the people understand, okay, they're in it with me all the way. So Kent, what else would you add?
Well, a couple things, actually three things. One, this isn't micromanagement. This isn't me standing over them, because if you bug people enough, work becomes the course of least resistance. Yeah, if you bug them enough, it becomes, I'll do the work because they're bugging me. But who has time to get everything done and micromanage? This is really just a check-in. And we find that a lot of teams find this very helpful to begin or end their week, every week like this, about these big projects or initiatives that people are working on. What did you say you were going to do? Did you do it? What are you doing next? And how can I, remove the barriers? How can I clear the path for you? We as leaders should be thinking about what can we do to make it easier for our employees. And to say, well, no one made it easier for me, all the more reason why you should do it, right? Here's another really big important piece about this. We all have bosses that we report to. Now, Dave and I own the company, right? But we still have, board members, we still have clients that we work for, and so on and so forth. And it's amazing how you can use this process when you might say working up with the people you report to or with peers. It doesn't have to be just people that report to you. So when someone's asked you to do something and you're clear about the request and the promise and what's the delivery going to look like, particularly if it's something over a period of time, meaning more than a week. In this class we were just doing for a bunch of leaders a few minutes ago, what we talked about is, let's say that your boss comes to you and she wants you to do this thing and she needs it in 2 weeks. And let's say that it's Wednesday. What we'd recommend is that, and we said, put a note or put in your calendar electronically on Friday morning at 10 a.m. or Friday at noon or whatever, reach out to the boss and reach out to the boss and do it this next Friday and the next Friday. And what you do is you send a little email and call, go by their office and say, hey, Terry, I just want to make you aware that here are the 3 things I've done on that project. It's looking really very good. At this time, I don't really need anything else, but just want to give you a heads up about what we're doing. And then the next week, give them the same thing. If they're not having a meeting, you just return a report then to let them know what's going on. Be proactive. Take responsibility for what you're doing and keep them in the loop. Then they don't have to wonder what's going on, because we've all had this happen. You've delegated a very important project, initiative, assignment. You're praying they get it done. And you know what? You can do this if you'll set up the accountability, do the accountability. It can be, this doesn't have to be a sit-down meeting. It can be, a Zoom call. It can be just a quick follow-up call. If the shoe's on the other foot, you take the responsibility. Maybe not have a meeting, but just give them an update. And I'll tell you what, they will be so blown away because, wow, Susan really does a great job of keeping in the loop about what's going on. I don't have to go home Friday thinking, I hope something's happened with that. Gee, I hope something's happening with that. You don't have to. And you say, well, that takes some of my time. Yeah, but who's increasing their value to the organization? Who's increasing the trust the leaders can have in you, your clients can have in you? You are, because of your proactivity. You're taking responsibility and you're looking ahead. So where do you need to use this? Who do you need to use this with? Take some time now to think about 1 or 2 assignments where you need to do a little better job with request, promise, deliver, discuss, and write some ideas down and then go have a meeting with them. David, as we wrap up, what would you add to this conversation?
No, I thought the last couple of points you made were so strong, because this is a process that if people aren't doing this with you, now you have an opportunity to start doing it to them or with them. And so you can model this behavior. So this RPDD models, if your boss doesn't do it or people that you report to don't do it, this is a great opportunity for you to model this behavior when you're sitting across the table and you're having these type of discussions. And then it's also important for you as a leader to model to your direct reports as well. So just want to reemphasize that point. It is a model that you can use going up within your organization and a model that you can use going down within your organization.
Absolutely. Well, we are so grateful to have you participate with us in another segment of the Blaze Leadership Academy. please let us know what your thoughts are, any recommendations you have, and hope you have a fantastic day and a wonderful week.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.